Hey, welcome back to Room 237, coming at you with actually a new movie review. I got back a little while ago from seeing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I went with my brother and my dad. Huge Tarantino fans. This is the first movie we've ever seen in theaters of his. And I have to say, ultimately, I enjoyed it. I did have some problems with it, which I'll get into. It's really hard to really review a movie like this after just seeing it once and not really being able to see it again unless I go to the theaters. But yeah, because it doesn't really feel like a Tarantino movie up until like the third act. This is gonna have heavy spoilers. I guess I'll go into the plot as best I can. Basically, some backstory is back in 2017, Tarantino announced that his next project was going to be a nonfiction film based around the Manson Family Murders, and to be titled Helter Skelter, which would have made it like the third major film to be called Helter Skelter. But I don't know what came of that. That ultimately did not happen. And it basically became like an alternate history movie, sort of in the vein of like Inglourious Bastards. It also ended up being called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I think is a play on the Sergio Leone Once Upon a Time series, which Once Upon a Time, what are all those? Revolution, The West, and Once Upon a Time in America. Which Once Upon a Time in America is one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite gangster films. Because this movie really pays homage to Italian films. It's still kind of a spaghetti western, which, Hateful Eight and Django definitely was. Okay, so to get into it, it stars, of course, Leo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt. DiCaprio plays this guy named, I already forgot his fucking name, Rick Dalton. DiCaprio plays Rick Dalton, who was a major like action hero star. I guess he was actually more of a villain in some things back in like the 50s. Then he went doing westerns on television, and now by like the late 60s, film and television is moving in a new direction. He's now down to doing guest spots on random TV shows. Pretty much show business is moving on without him, and he's sort of becoming a has-been, and he's not very relevant anymore. Pitt plays his longtime stuntman, Cliff Boothe, which, because of DiCaprio's limited, major work, he now has limited work, and he's basically DiCaprio's chauffeur and takes care of shit around his house. The two characters together, DiCaprio, because I was wondering what their performances were going to be like, because I love DiCaprio's performance in Django, and I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to top that. And they're two very different characters. Like it's kind of unfair to compare them. When it came to Brad Pitt, because Inglourious Bastards is my favorite Tarantino film, I liked his performance, but I didn't really like his southern accent. So I kind of figured I would like Pitt a little bit more, just because I had such high standards for DiCaprio. And DiCaprio is basically playing, he's doing two different types of acting. The actual Rick Dalton character is sort of he kind of has a stutter. He's always like ridden with anxiety and stress and worried about if show business is going to go on without him, if he's not going to be relevant anymore. And Pitt as Cliff Booth is more of like, he's super cool, super chill, but he's also straight as an arrow. Like, he does exactly what he wants. He's tough at it because he's a stuntman, but he doesn't break any laws like whatsoever. So it's just a very interesting dynamic for these characters, and you sort of feel like DiCaprio kind of walks all over Pitt or takes advantage of him at some points, but Pitt is forever faithful to him. And the first act is basically setting up these characters. It opens up with actually Al Pacino. There's this long conversation with DiCaprio and Pacino. Pacino is his agent, sort of saying how, I started, you started here, now you've ended up here, what the hell's happening? And I just want to personally thank Tarantino for giving Pacino this kind of fucking role, because he hasn't really done anything since Jack and Jill. Or, well, he has, but nothing that's amounted to anything. And Jack and Jill's fucking terrible. So actually, Al Pacino's role kind of reminded me of Mike Myers in Inglourious Bastards. A very a memorable character by a recognizable person. Of course, Myers and Pacino, two different actors, totally different actors. But it was glad to see Pacino finally get a decent role, so I liked that. And one of the major selling points for me, cast-wise, was Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate. Now, of course, shit, I dropped something. I don't know what I'm looking for. Sharon Tate, of course, is the, I don't know if you can say infamous, but the lovely actress who was married to filmmaker Roman Polanski, who was murdered by the Manson family on August 9th of 1969. So, but the thing about Robbie's performance, and when I first heard Robbie got the role of Sharon Tate, I thought, perfect. She's going to be perfect for this role. Even in the trailers, like how, like on the TV spots when they show her, like there's like the kaleidoscope 60s background, she's doing like all the dances. I was like, okay, she's really going to embody the 60s in Sharon Tate. But she's kind of underplayed in this movie. Like, the first half of her scenes, literally all she's doing is dancing. So all she does is dance. Even when she's driving in the car, she's still doing like hippie dances. And then when she actually does not dance and get to do something, it's pretty much just her finding her fame. Like, there's long periods that even cut back to it where she walks past a marquee and sees this film that she just did is playing. She wants her picture. She wants to get in for free. She tells the people that she's in the film. And then there's just long scenes of her just in the theater watching her own stuff. The second act was very boring. I will have to say that. DiCaprio sort of lands a role on the show called Lancer. It's a Western. He's supposed to be like this bad guy, and he has a wig, big mustache. The point is I guess the director wants to conceal the fact that it is Rick Dalton. And, Rick Dalton he's getting drunk, he can't remember his lines, he's stressing himself out. One of the few scenes that actually felt like Tarantino during this period other than like the opening Pacino scene, because Tarantino always has great openings with long conversations. I mean, the one in Inglourious Bastards is probably the best film opening in film history. He does this scene, and he keeps asking for lines. He can't remember the lines, and then it just hard cuts to him in his trailer, just beating himself up, swearing at himself, hitting the wall, just totally torturing himself. Also, I was impressed with the 8-year-old girl that is in this show with him. There's this great scene where, I think he's waiting for somebody. Oh, he's waiting to eat because they just put makeup on him, so he has to wait to eat. So he's sitting down reading a book next to this 8-year-old actress who's like super method. I guess I think that's kind of a joke. He's reading a book and she's reading a book about Disney, and she's asking him about his book, and it's like a story, this Western story that sort of parallels what he's going through as an actor, and it kind of makes him break down. But I thought the girl did a good job for an 8-year-old, and I thought it was funny that she's playing this serious a method actress. The movie really picked up for me because this movie it's like 162 minutes, so it's pushing the 2 3/4 hour mark, which isn't out of the ordinary for Tarantino. It's pretty normal. But even his other movies that are that long, like I know Pulp Fiction, definitely Glorious Bastards, definitely Django, are all pretty much that length. They all don't feel that long. They're faster paced. There's more things to keep you interested. It's full of more Tarantino tropes. This whole midsection is mostly just DiCaprio working on this one show. And, there's like scenes of Brad Pitt supposed to be fixing this antenna on DiCaprio's house. But also, Pitt keeps seeing this hippie girl down at a crossroads, or like a four-way. And, she keeps pointing to the direction she wants to go, and he's always going the other way. But this day, he is going that way. And you can tell she's a Manson girl. And, her name is Pussycat. And there's a funny line. Whatever. So, she says they're going to Spawn Ranch. And he's like, oh, I know Spawn Ranch. I used to shoot westerns there. So, they get to Spawn Ranch, and I think part of Pitt's performance is he's completely oblivious. He's not in like a Leslie Nielsen kind of way, but sort of, I'm not kind of like a Big Lebowski kind of way. He's oblivious, but he still has his own goals of what he wants to do. So they get to Spawn Ranch, and it's all these disgusting fucking hippies. And I'm not saying disgusting because they're part of the Manson Cult or because they're all scraggly and drugged out. Just, I don't like hippies at all. And, which is the reason why I love the ending so much. I probably should have said spoilers. I haven't really gotten into anything major. Highly recommend it. If you think you're going to get like a Manson film, you're going to be very disappointed. If you think you're going to get another, balls to the wall Tarantino movie like Django or even Pulp Fiction, which this movie was supposed to be Pulp Fiction in the 60s with Manson as the backdrop, I don't think it really lived up to that as much. But you know, it's still a Tarantino movie. It is much slower, but you know, I would recommend it. The end, the whole third act makes up for it. So spoilers from here on out. And you know, I guess all these hippies on Spawn Ranch, like one is played by Harley Quinn Smith, one is played by Danielle Harris. The one that Dakota Fanning plays, she's unrecognizable. You know, they really made these hippies look fucking gross and disgusting, like they are. But this guy George, who is based on the character that let Manson and his followers stay at the ranch, he's played by Bruce Dern. And there is a long, funny Tarantino conversation between the two, where Bruce Dern can't remember who Brad Pitt is. He's also blind. And there's this funny thing, you know, he has to sleep during the day so he can watch TV with Squeaky, which is Dakota Fanning. Which is based on the girl Squeaky, who was a Manson girl. So there's this funny scene. It wakes him up, and he mentions Squeaky, and Brad Pitt's like, "Is that the redheaded girl?" And Bruce Dern's like, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me! First you wake me up, and then you ask me, you know, like." Like, I just told you I'm fucking blind and I can't know the girl's hair color. The way he said it was very funny. And, you know, it becomes very apparent that Brad Pitt's not welcome on this ranch. Someone plays Tex Watson. And this one nasty hippie dude punctures his tire, Brad Pitt's tire. Beats the fuck out of him in front of all these nasty hippie girls. Like, hippie girls that are always just like, oh, and doing all these like weird stances and like faces, like just gross people. Nasty people. Don't talk to them or be near them ever. So basically what the third act is, for me, from that point, what leads into the third act is really where the Tarantino stuff comes in. DiCaprio nails this one scene, which is in the trailer, when the girl says that was the best acting I've ever seen, and he cries. We get this long voiceover by Kurt Russell, because you have Tarantino regulars, you know, old and new. You know, you have a scene with Michael Madsen, Kurt Russell, Zoe Bell, Bruce Dern. I guess Tim Roth had a scene, but it got cut. My dad and brother spotted Samuel L. Jackson. I didn't. I actually missed it. So, and Kurt Russell's great and everything. So Kurt Russell provides the voiceover pretty much, you know, over the next 6 months. DiCaprio and Pitt they flew to Rome to do these Italian films, which was something DiCaprio didn't want to do, or his character didn't want to do, because he thinks Italian cinema is terrible. And one interesting thing is, as Kurt Russell's narration explains, one film was released by Antonio Margheriti, which, if you remember in Inglourious Bastards, when the bastards get to the film premiere and they're being introduced to Christoph Waltz, they all go by these Italian film names, and Eli Roth was Antonio Margheriti. So I caught on to that. I thought that was neat. Helped, you know, expand the world, Tarantino's universe. So then they come home, and DiCaprio is now married to Lorenza Izzo from Green Inferno and Knock Knock, which is Eli Roth's wife. And you have this is the only time there's really tension or build up in the movie. You know, it's almost like Goodfellas, where it's like it shows the time of the day. It's August 8th, starts at 12:30 in the afternoon. It says what Margot Robbie's doing, who's now 8 months pregnant. DiCaprio and Pitt, what they're doing. And basically, you know, Margot Robbie's having friends over at her house because she's neighbors with DiCaprio. DiCaprio and Pitt have just been drinking all day, and Pitt had just smoked a cigarette laced with acid, and he's walking his very well trained pit bull. So Tex Watson, Squeaky, this other chick, and this other girl, they're supposed to go to this address, which Manson thought I guess a music producer lived there, said kill everyone. But they had this piece of shit car. DiCaprio yells at him to get the fuck out, and he's like, "You fucking hippies!" And I'm like, "Yeah, tell those fucking hippies." And so they back way back down the driveway, and you get this scene where, you know, hippies are like this. The girl in the back seat's like, "You know what, man? Like, yeah, man." About how, you know, they learned how to kill because of people on TV, because they recognize who DiCaprio is from, like, his TV shows where he's, like, Western shooting people. So you have this long-ass scene of them walking up the driveway, cutting to what Pitt is doing, DiCaprio's doing. And then they finally get in the house, and this is where it all pays off. Pitt is now tripping. And, you know, this is where, like, Hateful Eight and, you know, ending to Django type violence comes in. Just, you know, the pit bull, he has the pit bull attack. You know, he's biting the Tex Watson's arm and balls. And then he sicks him on the other girl. Then he grabs this other chick. This was beautiful. Best thing I've ever seen happen to hippies in fucking a movie or ever. He starts bashing her head against the wall, then pictures on a wall, then the table, and then the fucking concrete mantle, the corner of the mantle. And I mean, her head is a bloody fucking pulp. Beautiful. The one girl that was all just like, "Man, yeah, man." She's just spazzing the fuck out. She's running around with a knife, and she ends up in a pool where DiCaprio's been oblivious to this whole thing. So DiCaprio gets out of the pool, and he's just like, "What the fuck?" So he does this like funny little run because he's all wet, so he's like running like this in the background. He comes out with a fucking flamethrower, which he had from some World War II film he did that we see in the beginning of the film. Just torches her. And then you just get this hilarious scene at the end where, like, you know, someone who's like a producer or someone at Sharon Tate's home is asking DiCaprio what's going on, so he explains it, and he's like, "Oh, is everyone alright?" He's like, "Well, the fucking hippies aren't." And then you get this great scene at the end where he's like, "Well, come on in, I'll introduce you to Sharon Tate." Because in the beginning of the film, he's like, "You know, my neighbor is married to Roman Polanski, the biggest director around. Director of Rosemary's Baby," which is one of my favorite films. So then he finally gets to meet her, and, you know, it alludes that maybe now his film career will take off. Oh, a lot to explain. And, you know, the thing about this movie is, um, Tarantino at this point, he has a certain style, and you know, I think this movie is very different. You know, this felt more like a straightforward comedy than his other movies, even though all his movies are funny. They all have humor. But this movie didn't really have... You know, the first act kind of felt like Tarantino sporadically. The second act, not really as much at all. The third and final act was Tarantino. Like, that act alone could have been a short film, and it would have felt, you know, like a great Tarantino movie. So, yeah, it's definitely not one of his best, but it's far from his worst. I mean, the only movie, again, that I would say I don't like of his would be Death Proof, which ironically is his only horror film. But, you know, I liked this. I would kind of link this up with, like, Jackie Brown. You know, it's not a chapter film, which Django isn't either, but you know, it is more about, you know, certain groups of people. Well, Jackie Brown is about a bunch of people, but you know, it is more just a bunch of scenes put together. It is pretty random. It does go and like, the narrative is only linear because it goes chronologically. It doesn't skip around like his other films. But it's not really telling a story. It's more so just random bits put together. The only real story is DiCaprio trying to stay relevant in Hollywood. But, you know, you obviously... Another thing you get with Tarantino is you really feel his love for film, which, you know, the last few films have been spaghetti westerns. This one goes all out and pays total tribute to Italian cinema, which I'm a fan of. It is Italian horror mostly. But yeah, I mean, obviously I can recommend it. It was very good. Just, I don't think it was his strongest. I was worried about how DiCaprio or Pitt's performances might be. I've heard great things, and ultimately my consensus would be Pitt might have done a little bit better than in Inglourious Bastards. You know, because in Bastards, even though that's my favorite film of Tarantino's, he didn't have that accent that bothered me. DiCaprio, you know, he's playing a sinister character in Django, which I think was a much stronger performance. But he is kind of playing a pathetic person in this movie. Someone that you kind of feel bad for. But when he's acting as the character in that show, Lancer, you know, it feels like he's playing a 60s Western actor. He is doing it very well. And yeah, Margot Robbie was underused. Maybe it was because, you know, she is a real person that was horrifically murdered while she was 8 months pregnant. Maybe Tarantino didn't want to, you know, exploit her in any way, or, you know, dramatize her in a way that's not like an official film about her. I don't know. But I did think Margot Robbie was such a perfect choice that I wish she had more more scenes than just her dancing and, you know, watching herself on screen. But as a Tarantino film, I was pleased with it. This is sort of one of those middle of the road kind of ones. Like, it's not, I don't think it's great, but I don't think it's terrible. But I did think it was pretty good. And again, the third act was awesome. I loved the ending. Totally made it worth it. And yeah, so That's my long-ass half-hour review for... I guess it fits. Long-ass movie, long-ass review. So, yeah, that's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So, thank you for watching.